Hi guys, thank you for joining us. Bunch of dark suits, we are dark suits. I'm going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves one by one, if you would. Chris, Abell.
Oh, great, up first. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Chris Abell. I'm the VP of Food and Beverage for Marriott International. We're one of the largest licensed restaurant operators here in the Middle East. I think we've had the luxury of building a fairly solid team when we merged with the Starwood. So Marriott and Starwood, obviously you know, is one big team now. And that gave us an opportunity to really put together a diverse group of people. So we assembled a food and beverage team here in Dubai, which oversees the Middle East and Africa, about 18 months ago. And I think we took a different approach. What we looked at was working on making sure that we had a portfolio of restaurants which were leased, licensed, concept, and operated ourselves. And to do that, we've hired people like restaurant brokers, concept people, and of course, discipline experts like food and beverage and culinary as it is. My background is food and beverage, but the last 5 years, I used to work in our corporate team running an innovation. We're actually working for Brand, running an innovation operational team. So the idea coming out here was to approach things very differently and to look at things from a slightly different lens. And I think slowly as we get traction, that's what we're doing. We're looking at things differently. We have a few key theories. I'd like kind of make sure that our owners really understand this. We'd like to build smaller, smarter spaces. I think that's the first thing that I'd like to get across is smaller, smarter spaces is really, really important. The second thing I think that we're trying to push across is that we're looking at, it sounds odd, but we want to build now, design later. A lot of times in hotels, we're forced to write concepts or find contracts, and the hotels are 6 years in the making. And then, of course, by the time we open the hotel, the concept's out of date or obsolete. So we're doing a thing called white space, and we're really encouraging our owners to hold space. We can do things like egress. We can do things like even hoods in kitchens and structure. But what we don't want to do is tell you what that concept is until 18 months or 2 years before that hotel is ready to go. I understand the nuances around that we have designers paid to do a whole hotel. We're strong components of working with independent designers like KEANE, who really specialize in restaurant design. And if we can back out those areas from those contracts and say that this area here is a white space, and we'll worry about designing it 2 years, 18 months from the hotel opening, I think is a really important piece.
Thanks, Chris. I was about to interrupt you, then you mentioned KEANE, so I'll let you talk.
Sorry.
Amit, please tell us about yourself.
Hi guys, nice to be here. My name is Amit Nayak. I head the Hotel Asset Managers Association for the region, where we basically work with owners of most of the hotels within the region and elevate all our challenges within the market and work together. My day job, I head the hospitality development for Wasl, which is a Dubai-based company which owns 16 now. We opened the Mandarin recently. So 16 operational properties, and we are building another 15. In total, as of now, we manage almost 100 outlets within our hotels in Dubai. And I do agree with you with respect to the white spaces. So in all our new developments, we have got a couple of big ones coming up. MGM Bellagio Aria being one of it, which is an integrated resort where we have around 30 F&B outlets. And one of the key things that we are doing so far out as of now is white spaces. We are allocating concepts, but not developing them as of now. And the whole idea is to look at it in a very, in a synergy of things where everything would pan out closer to the date so that it makes sense. With the operators, we have always love-hate relationships, and I always believe that when they sneeze, we catch a cold. So this is where I think the working relationship has to be very productive and more ROI driven, like all the presentations that we have seen till now. And I think look forward to a nice discussion.
Russell Scott.
Good morning, everybody. I just need to put something straight about the chair. Stefan said, would you bring a stool with you, which was a whole different thing to a chair. So just to make sure that we're not prima donnas. I'm Russell Scott. I look after Accor's F&B for the region. To give you some scale, it's 263 hotels currently, 200 in the pipeline, 33 brands, and round about 1,500 F&B outlets. So growing, interesting brands, expanding rapidly. The issue for me with F&B, and it has always been with F&B, is do you ever start at the beginning understanding what it is you want to develop, or do you just develop a hotel with a box and decide what goes in the box later? I think the future, from our point of view, is understanding what the market trend is at that time, delaying the decision, a bit like the white space conversation, delaying the decision as late as you can to make sure that you're positioning the food and beverage offering for the marketplace, for the customer, at the right price, which will then generate revenue. And I think one of the things that we all talk about is all the ROIs and everything that goes with asset management. But the reality of this is, if you don't make revenue, none of the ROIs stack up. And it starts with how big you grow it, as we mentioned, to how small it should really be. I'm a very traditional restaurateur. I like to have small restaurants that have 2 or 3 or 4 sittings, rather than having a 300-seater restaurant that is only full. But had it been an 80-seater restaurant, you would have created a wait time, you would have created some interest, and that would have been a busy restaurant. So again, like my colleagues, look forward to having a better discussion.
Fabulous. Naim Haddad, I believe.
Maadad it is. I've known him for 20 years. He still calls me Haddad, but it's okay. I'll leave. I'll leave. Chief Executive Officer of Gates Hospitality, owners of hotels, resorts, food and beverage, and spas globally within central London, Australia, and the UAE. On the local ground here, 12 F&B restaurants, venues, another 16 that we operate on others' behalf. The ownership of 6 Senses Ziggy Bay, Moosa Peninsula, and certain spas that we do operational policies and procedures and concept definitions. Unlike my colleagues, we're small, we're boutique, focused. Not that they're not focused, we're more focused because of the size. Looking forward as working with our colleagues in the hospitality industry. Delighted to be here, but more importantly, thank you for joining the session and joining AHIC and Griff.
Yeah. Anil, Mr. Anil, how are you?
Okay, Anil Bhardwaj, Moosa Enterprises, headquartered Dubai. We have basically hotel ownerships, about 15 of them, of which 13 are in the UAE and 2 in Oman, Muscat and Salalah. Of our hotels, mostly internationally managed with all the big boys. We pioneered the hotel apartment concept 30 years ago in Dubai. Golden Sands, some of you may have heard the name. But the rest are all internationally managed. Of the 45 odd F&B outlets that we have, there's some interesting trends over the last 2 years, and this will come out further in our discussion when Stefan asks the right questions later. But Dubai is a very challenging market, F&B wise. But it's also the testing ground, if I may say so, for the entire region, actually. And it sets trends which others tend to then look at our results before they adapt, adopt, whichever way they want to go. You know, a lot of the comments that Stefan made in the beginning, I knew he took some feedback from me, so you've heard some of my feedback in that. And we'll talk more about it, Stefan, later.
Yeah. Thank you, Anil. I'm going to address the first question to the 2 owners, if I may describe it, and actually Naim as well, because Naim's in an unusual position as being an asset manager and operator, which is quite unique, which is great to have him here. But this question, if I may, relates to the research that we did. So there's 3 aspects, Amit, and do be brief, because I need to make sure we get everyone involved in this. It's the competition aspect, the leasing aspect, and the marketing aspect. Tell us, in your portfolio, what's your perspective on those 3 areas?
From a competition perspective, I think in our portfolio we are very well placed because we got some very niche portfolios and it works well. Marketing, I would say yes, that is sort of where we drop the ball, and we need to create that vibe in the market with all
the owner of Barasti, the
so
king
that's
of
where.
bars.
So these are the niche outlets which are something that if you have to recreate it somewhere else, that is the challenge. Yeah? So these are concepts that are amazing, but as well as from a marketing perspective, those concepts does not need an operator to market. It markets by itself.
Right.
But if I would have to create a new outlet and I would want my operator to market it, this is where I think the challenges come up. On the lease aspect, I'm not that big a fan of lease, because the reason we get an operator on board is because he knows the business. He's supposed to know F&B as well. And if he does not, they put their hand up and tell us that, okay, we bring in an operator of reckoning, we put in a management contract in place, and then they manage the outlet. Lease for us becomes the easy way out, and that would be something that we would look at it as a last resort.
Amit, if I may, sorry, Anil, if I may, competition, leasing, and marketing. Your perspectives on those.
Well, F&B competition, and Dubai is, I think, a classic case where the competition is now very severe on the F&B side, primarily driven by the high supply side of restaurants, both freestanding as well as in the properties. This competition, combined with not so great operating skills of the majors also on
The
F&B
major restaurant
operators,
The
of the
hotel
major
operators.
hotel operators.
Okay.
I mean, they are frank enough to admit that they are not great F&B operators
Compared to the restaurant sector, or?
compared to their ability to handle the room side of the
Oh
business.
my, okay.
Okay, I mean it's
Mhm.
in their quieter moments, and after a couple of beers, probably they would tell you
Mhm.
that. So so long as things were good, which is about till 15, 16, you know, even owners were seeing these wonderful fancy returns at the bottom. You didn't bother too much. But the last 2-3 years, we realized that F&B will have to play a greater role, and we started stepping in and assisting is the milder word. Initiating and driving is probably the more accurate word, our F&B side of operations. Primarily by, for example, taking international brands on board on a franchise model, not on a lease model. On leasing, I might add a comment. As owners, when you go in for a lease, there are two reasons primarily. One is you don't have the capital or don't want to invest the capital. Number two, you think that the leasee will do a better job on running the place. On the first count, frankly, as owners, we really don't need the money. We have enough of our own resources to do it. And so that's primarily driven why we didn't go into leases. We are hoping that with this new model we have adopted, whereby we've taken these international franchise brands and let the operator, assisted strongly by us ourselves, see how we will fare now. If that is also a failure 3-5 years down the road, then maybe we'll have to.
So you have a Marriott and a Hilton opening on the Palm. I don't know, how much can you tell us about the brands going in there?
Well, there's a third one, which is the Taj Exotica.
Of course.
Okay, those are the three. And then, of course, we have the Hiltons in Dubai. We have the Hilton in Oman.
We have some brands coming into the Hilton and the Palm specifically from franchises, quite a lot of franchises.
Yes, right at the design stage itself, we realized that, you know, we would give our input onto how the F&B should be run.
Cool.
And
So Naim, you're on both sides of the fence. I love this. Tell us about your perspectives on whether operators can compete, the leasing aspect and the marketing piece.
I don't think there's one solution. I think we should be looking at particular locations and analyzing the situation, comp set, the market density, and finding solutions. Leasing for me is an option, not the only options. You have the franchise, you have the what I call the RMA, Restaurant Management Agreement, as opposed to Hotel Management Agreement. You also have the revenue share. So I think what has happened over the last 5 years, the market has matured drastically, and I think people are looking at creative ways in order to attract components to complement hotels, rooms, and making sure that the entire asset is being sweated to its full capacity. This is where I'm seeing the market moving forward. Competition is tough. Competition will continue on being tough until we have a balance in the equation of volume versus venues. And again, I think what we're seeing a lot now is the hotels, food and beverage solutions are also trying to talk to hotel guests, but also communities that reside here, which is quite interesting.
Naim is an extraordinary guy, an extraordinary speaker, and he's holding back. Can I ask another question? Hotel operators and freestanding restaurants, because you operate freestanding, what's the difference?
freedom, authenticity, relevance, and speed of action.
Agility, right?
Meaning we react very quickly to the market, we're connected, we're grounded, white space is well and good, leave them until last day to develop them, well and good. We're a lot more connected. We're on the ground, we live, we breathe. So I have a group in central London, I have a group in central Australia, and here in Dubai that actually do nothing but operate these venues. So they live the city, they develop the city, they drive the city, and they understand what the city needs. And the focus is, for our business, is making sure that if we are within hotel parameters, venues, we cater for that audience, but as well as attracting the people that reside in the communities, reflecting value, reflecting consistency, creativity, authenticity, and neighborhood experience.
Can I dig a little bit deeper? Sorry, guys. One little bit is, in terms of the restaurants that you're operating, if you ran a hotel F&B, if Mr. Anil gave you his hotel tomorrow and you had to do room service, banqueting, all the other stuff that you have to do as well as run the 1 or 2, 3 restaurants, would you do as an effective a job whilst doing all the other stuff that every hotelier has to do, right?
Sure, look, again, as you know well, my background was MD of Six Senses, MD of Anantara as a group, so I've seen the hotel side, I've operated those brands from a hotel perspective as well, food and beverage as well as spa. I think what we are doing, what we're specializing in, whether it's the spa division and or the food and beverage, all of our attention, all of our focus is channeled purely on these businesses. And that's why our sales and marketing, our social media, our PR talks to the relevant people. We don't sell the rooms and then these are all services that happen in the hotel. No, these are businesses. These are assets that need to develop a business concept, drive the business concept, drive ROI as an investor, and make sure they stand out as a business unit within that big picture.
Right, thank you. Finally, back to Chris. Apologies. The operator perspective, I'll ask Chris and Russell broadly the same questions. Right now, general managers are asking owners for investment in their property. Mm-hmm. They're getting rejected.
Yeah.
Why are they getting rejected, and how can you change that picture?
I think, to be honest with you, one of the big things is that, yes, we want up-to-date restaurants. We want restaurants which are on trend. But to be honest with you, and I speak to our general managers all the time, sometimes I think we're asking for too much. I'll say this genuinely, that we want to renovate, we perhaps want to renovate with less money, okay? I would rather turn around to the gentleman here and say, okay, I'll invest less in the renovation, but I want you to reinvest in 4 years' time. So the mistake we're making is we're looking at our ROIs and we're going in with the mahoganies and the woods and doing something too expensive and coming to you saying, I need 10 million. But if I came to you and said, can I have 3 or 2 or 1 and 1, but can I ask you again in 3 years? I think we'll all be in a better place. So to answer your question directly, I think our problem is we're asking for too much. We should ask for little more often.
That's interesting. Are you free to talk about the incubator, which Lynn launched in Amsterdam?
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about it. We're not really official yet, but we are working with Griff on bringing people to the market. What we're trying to do is create a restaurant incubator. And the idea around this restaurant incubator is that we'd bring in, say, 3 or 4 chefs or brands every year to test the market. Going back to this franchise question, I think it's really important, or lease question, is that a lot of these guys don't want to come to town until they know that they've got something solid. They want to test first. We approach a lot of people. Lynn approaches a lot of people around coming to town, but this is Middle East. It's a little different, and they're a little nervous. But if we can get them in here first and say, okay, here's 5 months, here's a restaurant incubator situation, let's see if this works. Build their confidence, build our confidence, and then find the permanent location somewhere else. So we're working on this restaurant incubator, 4 or 5 operators from Europe mainly, over a 12-month period. Works great. If not, thank you very much. Goodbye. See you back in Amsterdam.
I was upset. I watched the video of Lynn talking. She's right in the audience here. And she says that we're looking for young entrepreneurs from Europe. And I thought,
that's a different reason, though.
Discounted immediately here. Bizarre. Yeah. Before I turn to Russell, what I'm going to do after Russell has spoken is turn to the audience for questions in 2 waves. Because as Naim said, we want to engage you. You've paid to be here. So you're going to ask some questions. So, Russell, GMs ask for capital. It doesn't always get approved.
Well, firstly, I think they ask for capital because they've got a failed concept, and the only way they actually understand how to change a failed concept is to spend money. Yeah. My approach, and I have to declare that I've spent most of my life as a commercial restaurateur, so when you do commercial restaurants outside hotels, you have a longer period that you have to make these restaurants work. we have a short lease mentality in this town, which means 3 years it should be happy we move on. So firstly, I encourage people to actually look at whether this restaurant is broken from a fabric point of view or whether it's broken from an offering, because 9 times out of 10 it's an offering, and that's down to the chefs and the management within it. We've sort of taken things a little bit differently now because we're breaking restaurants out from the traditional way of running F&B. So executive chef, directors of F&B that run everything. We're now saying that our specialty restaurants and our core F&B drivers should be run like a restaurant with a general manager and a chef that are 100% responsible for that unit, that they understand what the ROIs are, they understand how this should be working, and that they have the detail, the energy, what Naim was saying, and the day-to-day input to drive this restaurant forward. And I think the easiest thing within hotels is to say, give me some more money to spend on another concept. And in reality, if it's after 2 or 3 or 4 years, it means it wasn't right in the first place. You haven't priced it properly. You probably overspent. It's too large. You didn't get it right because you didn't do your homework. I think in today's hotel world, we are now more sharper in terms of what we're expecting from F&B, and we're spending more time looking about the positioning and delaying this positioning so that we get the offer right, first of all, that we can understand the ROIs and the returns, and that we look at these over a 5 and 10 year period rather in a 3-4 year period. Because you can say that trends change 3 or 4 years, but if you look in this town alone, there are restaurants here that are still successful, still winning things, that are 10 years old. An example I'd use is Tomo in Raffles, at Wafi. Yeah, it's 10 years old. It just won Best Japanese in its 10th year. Have we refurbished it? No. Does it look tired? Yes. But do people come for the food? Of course they do. We're not worried about the decor because we're getting the food. So I'm a little bit split in terms of the allegiance in terms of where we should sit, but my reality is if you create a good restaurant product, you don't need to continually spend money. Cool. Do the homework first.
Before I turn the floor,
can I add one comment, please, if I may? I think further to my colleagues about investment and are they asking too much or too little, I think the change in leadership in hotels also a lot impacts the change in capacity in concepts as well. The new GM comes in, the new F&B director comes in, and he has a shift in paradigm and asks for more money to make more changes because that's his style or her style. And that is a negative impact on the investors as such. And as investors, being in food and beverage ourselves or hotels as such, we have the capacity and the ability to say, no, you can't because A, B, C, D. But new owners would continue on listening and over-investing without seeing the ROI. And this is where the asset management comes in very handy.
Glad you raised that. My next question would have been to Chris and to Russell after the questions from the floor is, if you do get the capital approved, at this moment there could be 40 projects where that happens. That GM leaves in a year, right? So I'd like to know what the plan is for that. Right, questions from the floor. Very talented group. You should not waste this opportunity. The hand raised in the middle. Are we lighting? I don't think we are.
Right.
Right there. I recognize that guy.
That's much better.
With the restaurants. The advantage of hotels has been that they are licensed. And now we're seeing some licensed food and beverage outside the hotels. How is that going to affect the future look on the appeal of the restaurants and the hotels to the consumers?
Ask Amit, because he owns a huge bar, which could be impacted by that.
I think the outside hotels or the new builds that are coming up in the market, they encourage our hotel restaurants to go out and compete further stronger, yeah?
100% agree.
Because in the grand scheme of things, that's the ecosystem. You either fight for it or then we end up having to look for a lease. Yeah? And I think this is the important part, is that we do encourage all these freestanding restaurants coming in the market because they put in more life into the business. Otherwise, traditionally, I think things are changing, but normally it's the same cookie-cutter model that goes from one hotel to the other.
So you're not worried?
Sorry?
You're not worried?
Oh, no, we're very worried. But here's the thing. Frankly speaking, it's like that in the rest of the world. We just need to sharpen our pencils as hotel operators, and we've ridden that wave for too long. It's coming more and more, and we need to sharpen our pencils and be ready. Our pricing, our quality, our service, all those things we need to now think like this gentleman does, independently, in their swinging. And frankly speaking, it worked. You know, look, everywhere else in the world is like that, so why can't it be that way here? We just need to get back in the game and realize that we can't ride that wave anymore.
I see it as a great benefit for the consumers, Murad. I think the consumers will have options now saying, I don't have to go to a hotel to have such and such services. I see it as a benefit also for us operators because we don't have to go to hotel operators, beg for a lease at some unrealistic prices per square foot. So competition's coming hard at all levels. And I think what's beneficial is that consumers will soon have a lot more options. Let's just hope we have more consumers to fill all of our venues.
So, Mr. Anil, you have 3 hotels open in Palm at the same time as the Point and Nakheel Mall. So much more F&B just on the Palm, right?
That's true, that's true. Dubai is a very unique situation, I would say. I mean, the competition is just, too much. I don't know whether you can hear me. Yeah, so the competition is, I don't know, 17,000 restaurants or whatever, and, you just have to stay on top. The point the gentleman just made about all hotels in this region having this unfair advantage at the moment, actually, of having liquor licenses. Yes, that is very unique to this part of the world. And the day that's loosened up a bit, they will really have to pull their socks up even more.
Any other questions from the floor? Oh, a hand shot up over there. I once read a report by PwC that said that F&B is not strategic to the hotel business other than markets where licenses are controlled. Then F&B is strategic to the hotel business. Interesting. Where was it? Over here, I think it.
Yes, good morning. Stephen panel, thank you first of all for pushing the F&B agenda on the investment story. It makes a lot of revenue for hotels and it should be important. We talk about competition with locals. How do you see standardizing concepts in hotels compared to going more individual? You said hotels are good in standards, policies. Do we need more same concepts in hotels, or do we better compete with different concepts, individual concepts?
It's a good question. I think you can take it through the spectrum from economy all the way to luxury. I think within mid-scale and economy hotels, we need to get some standardization just to get the product mix right. It doesn't have to look the same, but it should actually formularically deliver the same return, have the same feel. Customers, however, when you go to premium and luxury, want individuality. We've had a long discussion recently about raffles in terms of should we be standardizing a long bar or a Singaporean restaurant in raffles and taking it everywhere. And the research has shown us is that people want to have an individual luxury hotel that gives them a brand new experience. They buy into the branding, but they don't want to have the same wherever they go in the world. So it's a little bit horses for courses. I think where you're trying to do a product and maintain a product with an ROI, with a low revenue, you need to get some standardization and make that formularic. But when you get starting to add a lifestyle or an experience to this, you've got to differentiate and give people a slight difference. They want the comfort of service, they want the comfort of the branding, but they don't want the same concept they had in the last hotel.
So you're not creating an Italian, a steakhouse within the Raffles family or within Accor? You already have, right?
Yeah, but we won't roll it out everywhere.
Right, that's interesting. Chris, maybe.
Ditto. Yeah, similar situation. Here's my take on that. First of all, research. You can standardize some stuff, but if the research doesn't line up with what you're trying to do, you can't just walk into a site, go, right, sports bar, steakhouse, 3-meal restaurant, we're done. The secret now, we really have to go deep on the research. We have to make sure that we've got the right concepts in the right places. But I agree 100%. In some cases, when you're scaling fast in the 3-star models, like the 4 points or the lofts, it's very difficult to custom write everything. And to be honest with you, it's not needed because those hotels have a different need. They have a different way, different customer. So in those hotels, then, I think a standardization does work. But exactly the same with the luxury, research, right for the customer, Okay, adapt, put different skins on things. But no, we need to make sure that we are looking at the different needs for the different customers. That said, sometimes you can reproduce things. But just because it worked here doesn't mean to say it's going to work over here. And that's the mistake that perhaps we've all made in the past. And we need to be wary of that.
I think
Before we take, go ahead, please, Amit.
Sorry, I would just like to add to that as well. I think it's also the legislation, the guidelines, the development guidelines that the local authorities like DTCM and all put in place.
Yeah.
Like, does a 3-star or a 4-star hotel actually need 2 restaurants?
Yeah.
You know, in the grand scheme of things. And I think this is again where HAMA is playing a very nice role there, where for the first time we will have a hotel owner advisory committee within DTCM. And this will be officially announced, I think, in the next week or so, where hotel owners will have a say in how these new guidelines and all are developed, what works for the market, and using your word,
representation at government level, which can only be good for everyone in the room, right?
Definitely, and I think this is where the voices with the key decision makers of who make or develop these guidelines will be heard.
Okay, harsh reality. Chris mentioned about the research piece, that the harsh reality is that as we speak within our region, even with you guys, there'll be 20, 30 meetings right now between an architect and an owner. You guys are not in the room.
We're not at the table.
The
We're not at the table early
The
enough.
architect has flown from San Diego.
Yeah.
They're drawing up a restaurant, a hotel for Abu Dhabi. The architect draws 7 boxes, F&B, 1 on the ground, 1 on the mezzanine, 1 on the roof.
Yep.
Then what do we do? You're
Yep.
fixed, right?
100%. We need to be at the table early enough to make those restaurants successful. The location. For example, one of our brands, a very big brand in Dubai, has got restaurants. It's like pepper dotted all over the hotel. Rather than creating a dining hub or a central location for the restaurants, I think if we get in there early enough and we can help with space planning, we can help look. We're not always wanting the front street. We don't always want the main road, but we can really get efficiencies, not just on the number of restaurants, but also on efficiencies on shared kitchens, shared back-of-house spaces. And quite often we put a plan in front of us and go, here you go, guys, fill these spaces. And by then it's all too late.
Can I get an owner's perspective on architects and owners meeting and not bringing the operator in early? Does that happen in your area?
Well, the hotels that we are developing, for example, on the Palm, we have an owner, a unique situation actually, where a national owner is very hands-on involved, being the first local civil engineer of this country. So he certainly has a say in all of this. So when we bring in, for example, an international franchise, they have their guidelines firstly. And we have our shell and core ready for them. But we're very particular about the kind of money we would be willing to spend. I mean, from an owner's perspective, there are certain aspects of every franchise that are critical to deliver the end result. And then there are these fanciful ideas he may have about gold plating the taps, for example, if I may stretch the example, where we would then certainly draw a line. And we do have inputs on even things like which are governed locally also by the extent of the sound, for example, the volume of the sound has to be X, or the lighting, the air conditioning, etc. There are things that you can, we as owners do look at those aspects without really diluting the franchise key aspects. So to that extent, we do contribute.
But the shell and core drawing, you said earlier, is given to the operator. Is there any engagement of the operator in defining that shell and core, or is it just given?
No, from an operational point of view, I think it is important to get his feedback. I think that is critical, and that is something we take even before we start designing the building itself. That's important, because at the end of the day, he has to decide where the kitchen location is and how the food is going to come into the restaurant. Mind you, after you've done your 15th hotel, you learn a few tricks yourself. You probably know their brand standards by heart by now.
Or guess them.
At least you try to remember them, but then they change every 3 days or whatever. So, there is input, obviously. And operators are also, their interaction with owners, I think the extent of interaction depends on which owner they're talking to. I mean, they are able to judge that here is an owner who's pretty well equipped in deciding and will not make a mess of things. Yeah. But it's better, because in your management agreement you have said, I will do anything, but I have to observe brand standards, and that's the big axe always hanging over your head. So you might as well sort of keep them in the loop. To what extent, of course, depends from owner to owner.
I'm so glad you said management agreements because we haven't touched that. We really should do. I'll start with Amit, if I may. But do management agreements, do they reflect why F&B is then the country cousin to the rooms? Because the management agreement tells you it's not as important, right?
I think from management agreement perspective, F&B is just there as a brand standard. From a delivery perspective, I think it's how well, and I think what Anil touched upon is very important, is how close you are with the operator, how much the operator trusts what you do. And I think the management agreement then builds on that. It's defined on paper, yes, but then as you go ahead with the contracts, where the drawings and actually building the property in itself, in all of the properties, the operator is as involved as us in every step of the way.
But if they're not making as much money out of F&B as they could do for the management agreement, then their focus, which we heard earlier, will be diminished, right? Will be lower.
But I think that's changing. I think that's changing. I think we all know that rooms brings the profit. We know that. That's fundamental. But food and beverage, and I think these gentlemen will agree because they've both got great, hotels with great food and beverage, that the food and beverage drives the image of the hotel. And the image is what we need to drive the rooms. It needs to be a combination of both. Well, 100% agree that rooms is the profit, but food and beverage is the image.
We look at it slightly differently now because that's a legal document that positions how the hotel should be positioned. In reality, we look at it in twofold. There's two factories. One's the sleep factory, where all the sleep goes on, and one's the eat factory. And they are separated in thinking now. So the sleep factory parks, and you talk about the eat factory, food and beverage, how it fits in, how it relates. Historically, it just fed the sleep factory. Today, it's a predominant part of the business. It's as strong as the rooms, it's a growing area, and the thinking is changing that dedicated teams. Let's use an example. We should have a marketing budget that actually has a food and beverage part of it, rather than it just being the total hotel marketing budget. So we're saying, let's give a proportion relative to the revenue to the marketing spend or F&B. 10 years ago, that would have never happened. 5 years ago, 3 years. That's the thinking. The thinking is that the thing that can drive revenue now is F&B. It's the most competitive part in the world because there are more and more entry, and we have to be quicker. So we have to think eat over sleep.
Interesting. Back to the floor. There's a hand shot up. Oh, imagine Duncan Fraser-Smith.
Trouble.
How are you?
Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Good.
I was reading the other day, a very prominent celebrity chef who has a restaurant here in Dubai came out swinging, pretty much saying that restaurants are now competing against themselves in hotels as a result of the number of restaurants that are going in. And he was quoting a new hotel, I don't remember the name, or I'm choosing not to say it out loud, where they've just opened, and they've opened with, I think, 14 or 15 outlets in the one property. What are the thoughts from the operators and from the investors, obviously? Because I think that there is we talked about sort of creating a brand behind the property. This is the ego portion, the piece that drives business. But what is the thought about, what is a realistic number? If you've got 450 keys in a hotel, how many outlets should you have so that people going forward actually have an idea in mind of what that should be?
I don't think there is a magical formula, Duncan. I think the formula is depending on your location, depending on your neighborhood, depending on the competition, is where you should be providing. I like the idea of the sleep and the eat. I made an earlier reference to it before, and I think whilst the sleep delivers the 70 plus on a GOP front, food and beverage on the half, I think we should be looking at the business saying to ourselves is, who's my competition? What are we competing with? Not every hotel has solutions for food and beverage to cater for the market as well as a hotel. Some by design and by choice only decide to feed the hotel, the banquet hall, fill up the rooms. But that's a business decision. I think there's nothing wrong with those business decisions, as long as you agree on them internally and deliver for them. Going back to your question, I think it's whereabouts are you? Who's the comp set? Who's coming in the next 5-10 years? And that's the volume.
Any more questions? I think the gentleman here is the closest to the microphone. That's why I chose you.
Patrick?
My name is Ali Murtala. Thank you so much for this panel. My question is, because a lot of you big brands have a lot of data coming in from the sleep side of the factory on what could be needed by these clients as F&B. And I didn't hear any reflection on that side on what choice of F&B is being provided within that property or different properties. Most of the reference was based on market and competition around. What are your thoughts on that?
Could you hear the question, guys?
I couldn't hear it.
I'm sorry, a little bit closer.
Sorry. So my name is Ali Murtala. Thank you so much for the panel. It's a quick recap on that. A lot of the conversation was on the market and what's being provided by other properties around. I didn't hear any conversation on, for example, all the data that's being collected from all the sleep side of the factory. Like, what are these guys that are coming in and staying in the hotel and what they want, and how does that drive the F&B selection?
We forgot the sleepers. Gentlemen, Russell mentioned the sleepers.
It's an interesting point. I think we have this legacy called an all-day diner that was meant to be there to actually collect sleepers. We've renamed it the room that does breakfast because you have to worry about the lunch and dinner part of this. And I think historically we've just done something that was international across the board, and that's what sleepers are about. So your point's quite valid that the sleepers come in, but their choice of destination these days is what's around them as well as what's in, and what the value for money is. And one of the things we did in this region in the early days was overprice the restaurants within the hotels. And so we encouraged you to leave the hotel because I'm on a budget, I want to meet some friends, I've got some business to do, we moved you out. Now, there was probably examples in the past, Emirates Towers of Jumeirah, when it had almost every restaurant, when it had the Ivy in the rib room and Hakkasan and everything in that location, allowed you to stay in the frequency. But I think this day and age now is to make sure that you get your restaurants priced correctly so that you have a low entry point and then you move up the scale. Rather than you have an all-day diner that is the main buffet area, and then the next restaurant you have is a very expensive specialty restaurant. So the key now for sleepers is to give them the option to stay, but to meet their needs. Now, if I just want a pizza, a burger, and a beer, I should be able to do that at a good price somewhere.
Yeah.
Chris.
Let me just end that, because 100% agree. So here's the thing. If you've got the most happening restaurants in the city, right there in the hotel, there's a buzz, there's a vibe, and all that's generated from what Russell just said, right pricing, right energy, right design, and that's happening place. The scenario is, I check into the hotel, check-in times, let's say 3 o'clock, I say to my colleague, okay, I'll go upstairs, we'll do some email, I meet you in the lobby at 6 or 7, and we'll go out for dinner. Now, if I'm standing in that lobby, and there's such a vibe, and this hotel's got such a great reputation for great restaurants, external brands, internal brands, energy, then I don't go anywhere, I stay there. But to do that, I've got to really target locals, and to get locals, I've got to price things right, and I've got to make sure that I'm targeting them. The restaurants are full. Wow, I'm staying here. I don't need to go anywhere. When people are coming to me, then this is where the energy is. But I can't do that with that old hotel thinking. So I 100% agree with what Russell just said.
Can I just add a point here? I think what's very important for me as an investor, operator, owner, whatever you want to call me, attract the local market and the sleepers will be happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're catering for the local market and they're filling your dining room, the sleepers would want to be there.
Yeah.
That's a summary.
Exactly that. And the simple answer to that is there's 300 people upstairs and 300,000 around you. So where's your catchment area? It's not up. There's
And also
another
I
answer. One quick question.
Sorry,
Now
Stefan.
there's a face I haven't seen for a while. Mr. Masood.
Hi, good morning. My name is Noel from August Consultants. My question to the panel, do you agree that while operators design hotels, that they look at what the local community wants and not what the sleepers want?
I think
It's changing, yes.
changing.
I'm going to say yes to that question. Maybe 10 years ago, no. But yes, from a food and beverage point of view, when we look at hotels now, the first thing I look at is the market, the local demographic. Then I look at the hotel customer.
That's what makes life difficult for the operator later on.
No, I think, just to, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry to add on here, the dynamic of the sleepers keeps changing. So if you look at 2006, 7, 8, you had the very high spending sleepers coming in who were spending money within the hotel and within everywhere else in the city. Today, the average rate compared to 2006 is way different. So, but the local community still stays there. The local community dynamic still remains there. And I think this is where, when you design your properties more focused towards the local community, and still you're agnostic about what's happening in the international market with your day visitors and everybody else, you create that harmony. If you only target or build your F&B with regards to the guests who are going to come in, you're setting yourself up to fail whenever there is a small shift in any of the macroeconomic environments anywhere in the world.
I don't think there should be a blanket approach. I think we should carve out certain spaces within the hotel that talks to local communities, and the balance talks to sleepers. I think it's a combination of each, but I think you need all of these USPs, all of these anchors to talk to everybody that could potentially help you return on investment.
The gentleman asked this question 10 years ago, Noel Moosa did Emirates Palace, and you got it right 10 years ago because you had a local flavor with Hakkasan.
That's
so
why
you
it's
got
changing
it right.
nowadays. Now it's changing.
Maybe.
You know, especially if the new rules come. I mean, now basically we're talking about the UAE, but if you're talking around us, all those, how do you call it, the benefits that the hotels have now, in other countries, they wouldn't have them. You know?
Interesting. I think we're out of time. Certainly, definitely out of time according to the screen. And Jennifer stood up, which means we're in trouble as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
guys.
Thank you.